Rolling, yeah.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the Grapplers Academy. This week is episode 47, and we researched that beforehand so that we knew exactly what we were talking about before we came on. And we're back with an interview finally. We've got Amber Ledger in, who's the expert in psychology and experts of the mind, as well as other things as well that we learned about before the podcast, but we can probably get onto that a little bit later on. So yeah, introduce yourself to everybody.
I'm Amber, I'm a Gemini. I'm a wellbeing practitioner at Bupa and also a performance coach as well, and a parkour instructor now. Don't know why I keep looking over there, trying to put me, I'm going to look at you too.
This is the thing that we were trying to figure out the other week.
Really
do we look
difficult.
at the camera or do we look at each other? And we just decided to
Sort of staring into space.
Yeah, I feel like I can't keep doing that.
Just look at us, it's fine.
Yeah.
We can do a weird edit on it afterwards and just basically spin you.
It's more visually pleasing that way.
Yeah.
But I'll look at you too.
Sounds like a plan.
So, Gemini.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was that the end of the introduction? Because we kind of got derailed off that, didn't we?
Yeah.
I don't think I saw myself as good as I should.
We can take a retake on that. I'll prompt you with a question.
Okay.
What's your background in psychology, and what sort of stuff have you done from a sports performance background that has kind of led you to where you are now?
So I just clocked my chin then from the angle when I was doing that. Sorry guys. So I did my degree in psychology and then straight away I was like, I want to do a master's, but I'm not fully sure what I want to kind of research in that area. So I just did applied psychology with additional statistics. Sorry about me. I ended up getting an intern with Wigan Warriors, which I just think was amazing at the time. Got to work with their performance coaching, look at profiling for how we kind of profile resilience, performance, kind of how we would look at replacing those specific characters within the team should they leave alone or should they get injured, anything like that. So really quite interesting stuff. And then I just decided, right, well, I'm going to do my research whilst I have the opportunity. There was no at the time any qualitative research with professional athletes and looking at choking under pressure, so kind of anxiety, performance and how that would impact. The team was great at the time, a lot of big characters, got to interview them weekly, and then once we kind of looked at their themes which was coming up, which was quite consistent, it kind of shocked me a lot of the themes which did come up. We then looked at implementing mental skills workshops within it to kind of get rid of some of these deficits, and then how we would then feed that up to the coaching, the management, and just improve kind of player welfare within the team. So that was amazing.
How did the team respond to that? Was that something that they were used to doing, or was that something completely new to them?
Psychology at the time, which is kind of why I didn't continue fully down the sports psychology route, it's very new at the time. It's 5 years ago. Females being in with a rugby team as well, I found it personally quite difficult. The coaching staff were amazing, the team was amazing, but I think for young lads with a lot of banter, a lot of kind of egocentric behaviours, it is quite difficult to assert dominance in that environment, and you do have to be very particular with what you're saying. You would have to go in very strong-willed, and I did enjoy it. I think maybe more so now if I went back into it, there would be a lot more acceptance of a female, but I did feel very much secondary to the males in the team, and I would kind of look at them for assistance sometimes, which is very different to kind of mental health. Yeah. That's more kind of female-led, whereas this is kind of more male-dominated. But anyway, so it was good in terms of, I do feel like they got a lot from it. There's particular relationships I have with certain people I work with who I still work with now. A lot of case studies, personal moments, which I found really beneficial. I can give you an example if you want something which I just think for me was massive. And I know for that individual as well. And so I was working with a basketball team at the time, and we had a particular player who was working with us and so gifted. He was also doing his masters at the time, really talented guy, and just one day his performance was off. It was just oh, that's a blip, it'll change. It didn't, and this 6 week performance review constantly, to the point where he was our star player, was actually now on a bench because it just wasn't working, something wasn't working. Eating hadn't changed, training hadn't changed, games hadn't, nothing that we could pinpoint. And then he was on the way back from like an away game. I was like, I'm just going to sit with him and just see if I can get something out of him without pushing too much. So I just sat with him, just talking about music, anything like that. And we just got onto a topic and we was talking about family. And I think I just said, like, oh, are all your family tall? Like, what's kind of, you know, your white male? Like, what's your family setup? So he was just talking about it. And he got onto the topic of his brother, and his brother had just been diagnosed with terminal cancer. He was younger than him. I could sense there was a lot of guilt here. There was a lot of, I'm not home, I'm not supporting my family, I'm not doing this. So we discussed it, and it was coming to the end, and I said, would you mind if I feed this back? I feel like it is quite significant to how you are at the moment, and I don't think that you've received the support because I don't think people are aware. You know, coach environment, you can get a lot of shouting from managers to players, you know, in your face, like, you're shit, what are you doing? It's very different to general, you know, I'm not going to go into work and my manager say, you shit, go home, you're on the bench today. It's not going to happen. Even in like a yearly review or something, they're never going to use that terminology. They're never going to come down on me that hard. So I was very aware of this, and I just thought, right, okay, how must he be feeling? No wonder cognitively his function has declined if this is on his mind 24/7. So I spoke to the coaching staff the next day, and I just said, listen, I think what's happening here is this is going to become a cycle, and now his confidence is really low. It could get to a point where he might end up dropping out or, you know, leaving because we're not facilitating what he needs right now. So anyway, we had an agreement that he's going to take 2 weeks off, go back home and come back. Did it, came back, now he plays in America in like one of the best teams.
Oh, wow. And that was the turning point for just getting him to switches.
Yeah, just to go back, have that, you know, because when anxiety creeps in, he's thinking like, what is it like at home? How are my family being supported? What's the setup there? It's a lot of, it takes up such a mental energy from you, and that's what people don't realise is mental, like, health impacts physical.
Yeah.
And it's only on reflection most people realise it, if ever. But if you have that person who's like facilitating that and understanding that and saying to you, you know, they're rationalising your thoughts of like, sleeping's not changed, eating's not changed, your team's not changed, the games haven't changed, what could it be? Yeah. And you start to actually identify it yourself, but seeing that by yourself, I think is quite difficult.
Would you say there's like certain personality types or characteristic traits that buy into this way of thinking better? Because obviously everybody knows about, you know, looking after your body, looking after your nutrition, especially if you're a professional athlete. Like, that's pretty much at the forefront of what you're being told to focus on, isn't it? But not necessarily focusing on the mental health aspects of what's going on, like, one, in the team, but secondly at home. Are there people, like, what sort of person was more likely to buy into that as a way of thinking?
I think definitely personality type. I think you've got the very egocentric driven person. If you're very extrinsically motivated by maybe fame, kind of the accolades, the social media presence, getting claps for every single thing you do, monetary sort of things, you're less likely probably to invest psychologically in yourself. You're probably more likely to look at skill-based performance and just think, well, as long as I do this, I'm okay. Whereas if you're someone who naturally is quite a self-reflective person, quite empathic, quite aware of the surroundings, maybe parental style as well. Like, if you kind of taught to look within yourself rather than just being like, no, lone wolf, this is what I do. Very rigid thinking, very like, no, as long as I adhere to my training, eating this, that, the other, I will be fine.
Kind of like that, push everything down.
Suppress, yeah. And it's going to come out in your late 30s. It's going to come out when you retire. How many athletes within that that bounce back window when they know they're going to retire have some form of breakdown, whether it's starting to use alcohol, cheating in relationships, just really bad decision making skills because that uncertainty, and they're just unaware of what's happened. Or even when they've left and then it's like, God, this routine I've had since maybe 12 when I've started to become into a professional has gone, what do I do? If that is all I am, what is life now?
And I suppose with that as well, with the sport like rugby in particular, you know, all those issues building up over the course of a career, and then all the brain trauma from the impacts of the sport as well, compound as like probably pretty much one of the worst cocktails you can have.
Yeah.
Rugby and boxing are your high risk, really high risk athletes, because boxing, because you're alone doing that, and the anxiety of that, and then the depression afterwards can be really significant. On top of that, you've got trauma on your brain, whether it's through sparring, whether it's through, you know, actually being in the ring or whatever reason, you have got trauma. There is no boxer alive who can come out of a career and not have any form of like grey matter on the brain or neurological damage. It's impossible. Basically their federation just makes sure it's within a legal limit that they can actually perform.
So they just need to medically clear them within a specific parameter.
I'm guessing the parameters are quite wide.
Yeah, and on top of that, you've got to expect as well. I think I saw it on the news the other day. I didn't fully listen, but all sports are now coming together to monitor concussion and the after effects of like dementia, neurological diseases, things like that. So that'll be interesting, but that's going to be a lifetime research now. They're going to have to monitor this for like 50 years or something. So prior to it, and also on top of that, you don't know what's organic.
Yeah.
So you got people like Rob Burrows who plays rugby, you know, who's now got a neurological disorder. Was that organic? Was he already going to have that, or did rugby increase it? A professional to say that.
Because that sort of almost fast forwarded it a little bit as well. So he's probably predisposed to getting it. But then the impact and the pressure of the games probably might have brought that years forward as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, you've got to think, you know, is he reflected on that and wishing he didn't have a career in rugby because of it? Or is he grateful that he had a career in rugby and, you know, he's lived a good life? You don't know until you're there. But yeah, so particularly with rugby and boxing in particular, when you end that career, if you've not set yourself up with what is life like for me after this, and just the highs as well, you know, a lot of us will never experience those highs in our life. When I listen to them speak, I think, no, I've probably never had that high. I've never walked out to a crowd of that many people and had people chanting my name, or scored at Wembley, or won a massive boxing fight that's been on Sky or whatever. And I think, no wonder, you know, as we're talking like arousal levels and things like that, it's pretty much your peak. Everyday life after that, you know, even if you're waking up next to your wife who's your love of your life, or you've just had even some of them say, didn't even feel that way when my first child was born.
Wow.
So when you look at that and you graph that, it's like everything else must feel pretty flat to it. So if they have a bad day, it's not flat anymore, it's worst case scenario. It's like, what do I have now?
So would you say the sort of responsibility for that would fall somewhere within the federations and the clubs to sort of, you can't exactly force them to do it, but encourage them to get an ongoing therapy throughout the career when they hit a certain point of the career?
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of the player feedback as well have said, if I need to go to a therapist, then I shouldn't be able to do my sport. I shouldn't have to have a therapist telling me what to do. And I think that's the worst way to look at it, because they are never sport-led. They are never going to be able to help you win at sport. But mentally prepare for that, or mentally prepare after it, 100%. That is your space then to discuss exactly what you're feeling. No coach is involved. You're not having to think, if I tell them a little bit depressed and not performing well, are they going to put someone else on my place? You know, there's a lot of that. So I think in terms of implementing it, a lot more player welfare is coming in and making sure, especially in the younger people, that they feel more supported in terms of things like giving up the option to do GCSEs to go full-time pro. That has risks in itself, you know. We've been in training before, and the guy said, you know, out of 35 of you here, 2 of you are going to make it professionally, but all of you are giving up school now. You could end up sweeping floors.
Like an oh shit moment.
That in myself drives my anxiety. If I think, God, and at like 15, you don't even have those cognitive skills to even understand what life will be like if you don't make it. Like, and that's around who you're surrounded by. Are your parents great? do you have that innate drive to actually push yourself to do it, or are you just doing it because you think you're going to get a bit of money?
Yeah.
You know, who are the people around you? Do you have any past like traumas or anything which could be affecting you? So much into play. It's mental to think, you know, how many factors have to be aligned for you to fully succeed and perform consistently. So I think a lot of players I've noticed, if they are fully driven themselves to do it, they'll find a private practitioner away from a club, away from people who potentially could get fed back to. You know, there's a lot of lack of trust in sport, I think. I think they don't trust their teammates because essentially they're fighting for the same position as well. They don't support, you know, they go to a club and might not even get on with the manager, things like that. A lot of them don't even trust their own family in case they leak stuff to the media or things like that. There's so many factors which, unless you're aware of it, you just think, oh my God, they must have the most amazing life, they make this amount of money, they get recognised daily, X, Y and Z. But actually, the pressure and the impact of that to then perform twice a week and get that feedback, you know, you have a bad game, well, you'll get your shit on Twitter. It's just what happens. And they're just meant to just combat this weekly and not let it penetrate them. So to do that, they need a lot of mental skills in place to start proactively.
So what sort of like, so if somebody's quite alpha or is more focused on like the physical aspects of stuff to improve their performance and the way you're thinking about this, what are some like early warning signals that they might notice in themselves before it gets to the point where it's too late to start dealing with some of these issues? Is it like going to present itself in necessarily a lack of performance in the sport, or is it going to be, you know, you're having shit sleep, or you're getting more frustrated more quickly with people? Is that something that you should be looking at like as a trigger for maybe I need to start thinking about how to deal with the psychological impact of what's going on outside and inside of the training?
I think it's personally individual. So if you know yourself quite well and you start noticing, actually, I'm waking up 4 times a night because things are on my mind, that's going to be a trigger for you. Being off food, lack of motivation, lack of interest, like not even wanting to feel like you want to turn up to training. So all things like that, obviously having any suicidal thoughts or thoughts to, you know, engage, or if you're not a drinker then you start drinking, or you start looking at stimulants, or behaviours just out of the norm, kind of trying to get stimulation elsewhere, then that's necessarily where you kind of be on. And you generally notice it with your performance. I don't think there's any person who's in a good mental state, a bad mental state, who says that's when my performance was like to peak. I don't think they... I mean, I would like to meet them and interview them if they're saying, you know, my whole life and everything
John
was...
Jones might be a decent example of that. He was a bit off the rails with cocaine and whatever, and still at pretty much the peak of his UFC career. But that's
But again, it's about functional as well, how functional you are with things like athletes aside or whatever. You know, people have OCD in general day-to-day life, but if they're functional with it, they don't need therapy because they're functioning. So it's all about like what is dysfunctional to you, rather than kind of, we do kind of try and pigeonhole people and diagnose them with things like anxiety, depression, and then it's like a lifelong thing, and it's not. It can be quite, you know, it can be quite intermittent rather than a lifelong thing. You know, with COVID, athletes, we went out the window, that their mental health was quite difficult because, again, they've gone from a routine to no routine, train yourself at home. Well, that in itself, for someone who's been told usually what drills to do, being in that environment with like a bunch of lads, that stuff, to be told, here's a programme, here's a backpack, go and run it off, like, and then not thinking, well, when am I next going to have a game? You know, especially with rugby, they're like, is the league even still going to be there at the end of this? So much uncertainty, and you're still meant to perform so that you can still be like an athlete. And I think, like, if we're talking about identity and things like that, you know, athlete is part of someone's identity. A lot of them take it as that is my only identity, and that's when it becomes problematic because it's a short career. It sounds like it's a long one, but if, you know, say we're here till 100, it is quite a short career in the long scheme of things.
50% of life, really, isn't it?
Yeah. So if you form everything you've got on that and neglect all these other areas of self-care, eventually it's gonna catch up with you.
So when you sort of recognise these sort of signs, really, is there any particular way that they should go out to sort of seek help? Because it's becoming more open now, isn't it? Less of a sort of taboo to be going to therapy and like, not necessarily taboo, but like there's less of stigma associated with it. Is it sort of simple as them to get onto Google, or is there sort of a more appropriate way for them to find the relevant therapist for what's going to work for them?
Well, I think if they're at quite a high level, they would have a club doctor, and then I would just check in with them 100%, and they would signpost where they felt was appropriate. If they're at maybe a lower level, or you're in another sport where there's no club doctor, go and see your own doctor, or even you can look on the NHS website and type in your local area, and it can come up with like the IAP services, which is access to psychological therapy, and you can actually go through the process that way. There is obviously going to be a waiting list because it is NHS, so it's not ideal, but there is a lot of reference there for kind of understanding, and maybe even just like checking in of, you don't want to be a Google practitioner, but typing in your symptoms and actually having a look at what that might be, because I think a lot of people, the psychoeducation around, they've had these symptoms for a long time, and they don't even know what anxiety, depression is, they don't know what OCD is, they don't know what personality disorders are, they don't know what these things are. So like, to understand yourself and seek help when you don't even know the symptoms, I think is quite difficult. People, symptoms such as like, excessive worries, unable to rest, feeling restless, irritability, lack of sleep. And then the physical symptoms, you've got like increased heart rate, feeling sick, not able to eat, overeating. All these different things are anxiety symptoms, which everyone's just like, yeah, so I used to like be sick before every game. So that's anxiety, that's where that arousal levels got a little bit too much. Yeah, it was literally like before every important game. I was like, did you speak to anyone about that? It's like, no, I'd just be like sick like 9 times and go and play. But I wouldn't have a good game because I felt so depleted. We could have spoke about that.
What are some other physical signs of that people doing a broad spectrum of sports might feel, or even just people in the day-to-day life? Like what, I'm sure a lot of people don't know actually what a panic attack or an anxiety attack feels like. So would it just be like increased heart rate? Is it like a feeling in your stomach, or?
Yeah, so like arousal stems from your limbic system, which is part of the brain. So as that arouses too much, that filters down to be your body goes either into fight, flight or freeze. So there's 3 different points. So if you fight, you're someone who actually that adrenaline can push you through, but you might feel very fatigued after it, very mentally fatigued from it because you're utilising it for adrenaline. Then there's the freeze response. So some people, again, mentioning rugby or even other sports, the ball's come to them and they've dropped it. So this was one of the guys which I spoke about in kind of my research, and he dropped it and he said, it shit me up because I was like, I'd never drop it in training, like what that wouldn't happen. He was like, but the pitch was a bit wet and I wasn't fully like ready for it. He said, I knew that was my bad. And then the ball came again, I did the same again, and he said my head just went, I just froze. He said, and all I could think of is, I hope the ball don't come to me for the rest of the game, I hope the ball don't come to me. So started like really panicking at that point. So that was like kind of a more freeze response. So just going a little bit back. Then there's fight, flee, freeze, flight. Yeah. So flight is where you just get off, you lose your head. Don't want to mention Ben Flowers, but he played rugby. The guy had him over twice. What did he do? Punched. Did that sort of stuff. So it's still an element of fight, but it's not fight in the right way. It's not that adrenaline push, it's more my head has gone. I need to escape from actually playing rugby and just assert my dominance on this person because my performance is not dominating this person anymore. So I need to physically, that's like the arousal level, I need to physically do that. So I think that's kind of an autonomous like response. I think we all know what kind of person we are. Some people are naturally quite, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you've had to kind of, have you ever been in a startle situation, like have you been burgled, attacked?
Luckily not.
No.
But I'm sure, I think I know how to respond in that situation, but I suppose you don't necessarily know until it happens. Probably the closest would be like being in a fight. that's not in the gym.
Yeah.
Like getting into a scrap in the street is probably as close to that. But yeah, luckily I've never been in a situation where I've been caught off guard necessarily like that. But go on.
So that's kind of how I would notice the kind of person we are. So that's a physical symptom. Being sick, a lot of people notice that. The lack of appetite, a lot of people say that. Feeling tension as well in our backs and neck is a symptom of anxiety. Sweaty palms, feeling flushed, fidgety, agitated, things like that.
I suppose like we've talked about it before as well, and the ability to be able to compartmentalise that in a match. Like maybe you've caught a bad pass or you've done a wrong move in a jiu-jitsu match or something like that, and not then letting that have a domino effect onto the rest of the game, being able to like, right, I need a mental reset on this, and then be able to move forward with what I know that I can do and should be doing, and not letting what's just happened affect me going forward. And that's quite difficult to do because a lot of people, as you said in that example there, will let that dictate how the rest of the match or the game goes and not be able to get past it.
Yeah.
I think like mental rehearsal is a big thing. I think people shy away from mistakes because if they see like they've made a mistake in rehearsal and how that's going to impact actually within the arena or performing their sport. But I think like making mistakes allows you to kind of, right, okay, I've done that, but I've overcome it. So if this now happens on a larger scale, I've successfully done this. Whereas if it's the first time happening when you need it not to happen, and it's like, oh, this isn't how training goes, this isn't what I do, your brain cannot make connections to be like, well, just do option B. Option A is not work, so do option B. So mental rehearsal is a massive thing. You know, a lot of people use like virtual headsets now, things like in cycling and stuff like that. They'll do the Tour de France and things, and they'll virtually use it so they recognise the routes. So that to the point where they'll like, you know, they'll get GoPros, check all angles, and make sure that person knows exactly what bends is coming up. I think they do it a lot in Formula racing and things like that. I'm not as familiar with that, but I know they do use something.
I think Lewis Hamilton used to say that he used to drive the course on the PlayStation before going doing his practice laps just to build up that muscle memory of what the course looks like. But that's like jiu-jitsu relatable would be putting yourself in bad positions in training and getting used to dealing with what it feels like. You know, because if the first time you've ever been in a bad position is in a match in a tournament, and you don't know how to deal with it,
start panicking,
you're fucked, aren't you? Yeah, you can have a bit of a panic moment, but practicing that in training week in, week out gives you a better perception of what it's like to be in that negative position and how to overcome it.
See it being like boxing MMA as well, where if you've never been hit properly in the gym, if that's when the spotlights are on you, you're going to be a bit like startled, and then this is going to compound throughout the rest of the match.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I just think mental rehearsal is massive. Like, if you've done something successfully, you're more likely to think you can do it again. Like, even things like, you know, I know in football they get them to walk onto a pitch wearing headset, like virtual, and instead it's Wembley. So they can get used to the size of the pitch. They get them to do the full lap, walk around it, see what it would be like, everything like that. So that's not a factor which can, like, decrease performance when they're there. Because if you think about it, if you're like some of the themes which, you know, we can talk about of like what the guys said was really factors which drove their anxiety was if they were playing a game and it was a rival team and it was like a lot of pressure on it, it was like a grand final or things like that, and then an additional factor was if they were playing a team, there was a scout there and there was someone on the other team who was going for their position, that would massively impact. I think that was like 88% of the team said, yeah, that would be the thing which would... All week I'd be thinking about it. I'd be thinking about that other person, or what's their fitness like at the moment. I'd be reading up on that other person. I'd be doing stuff. And I think what we took from that is you can't control that.
Yeah.
No person in this world, whether you're an athlete, whether anyone, anything like that, you cannot control the other variables. The only person you can actually control is yourself. So if you mentally rehearse right, if you get yourself in the best sort of physical shape that you need to be in, mentally make yourself proactively managing your mental health, and also give yourself some allowance to be like, life isn't perfect. I am doing the best I can, but potentially this and this could happen. How would I respond? And actually talk it through with someone. Even if it's like, you know, your wife at home or anything that's sexist, or your husband at home. Talk it through with someone, just be like, oh, imagine, you know, it's a wet pitch and the ball slips out of my hand and they score. Okay, what would that be like? Well, I'd be devastated because that could mean, you know, we've lost the game. Or I could do this, or I could do that. Okay, well, you've still got another 45 minutes, so what can you do now? You've got to let it go. If you hold on to it, it's going to affect your performance. You're conditioning yourself to respond in a certain way behaviourally. If you let it go, you can continue and peak performance. How many people do you know if like started off a boxing match really bad and you thought, oh my god, they're going to get knocked out, this is going third round, Anthony Joshua, you get punched down, whatever. Okay, but you still won the match. You've still won.
Yeah.
So how did you do it?
Yeah. So you just carried on like you said, didn't it?
Yeah.
So is there any sort of psychological models or sort of techniques that they could probably apply in their own sort of daily routine that would maybe even help with this, as well as like the visualization and things like that?
Yeah, I think it's like, you know, they do a lot of it. So kind of like, you know, if you've had a really great performance or really bad, whichever way, watch that performance back. Take yourself back to that moment. What had you done that day? How were you feeling physically before you went into that? How were you feeling mentally before you went into that? What areas did you overcome? So where did you show resilience within that? How did you control yourself when other variables weren't controllable? Become really self-reflective of yourself, really understand yourself very, very well. And then don't just focus on your positives, because eventually your negatives might come through. Your weaknesses are always going to show. And then if you zone in on that weakness when it happens, you'll go into the next game and you'll think, oh my god, I hope that doesn't happen. And then it might happen. And you go into the next game like, it's going to happen. It goes from, I hope that doesn't, it never happened. I hope it doesn't happen. It's going to happen. And that's how quickly it can escalate in anyone's life. Anyone's life.
Yeah, and then it's really difficult to turn the ship back to how you were at the beginning and get back into that mental space of success, isn't it? Without building an established pattern of succeeding back up again.
Yeah.
So if you did, for example, like get knocked out in a boxing match, would a good thing to do to be go back and put yourself in a position where you're building up that pattern of winning again before you get to a point where you're competing, so you can get in the mental headspace of I am a winner and I'm building up that pattern? Or do you go into like the reasons why you lost? Like, do you focus on the positives more, or the we'll call them negatives, just for the sake of these?
Yeah, it's just that if you give an example of say like a boxing match and well, Anthony Joshua did it, didn't it? You lose. No, he's not going to go back to competing with amateurs, is he? Because he lost.
Yeah.
That would just be too drastic, and it would be like, obviously, watch the performance. What factors weren't there on the night, which usually are there, which make you perform high? I wouldn't even say the word win, which makes you individually perform at high level. Then I would break it down. So if that person's like, oh my god, I'm going to have to give up boxing now, we don't know his mindset because I lost that fight. That's, to me, is a catastrophic thought pattern. You've lost one fight. Why are you then going to have to give up everything because of that? Then I would kind of break it down into what we call hot thoughts. So what are thoughts that support the view that you're not good at boxing? You've lost one fight. What are the views which support that this is a false fact? Well, I've won 28 others. I'm a world champion. I've done this, I've done that. Perform highly every day. Okay, well, let's focus on this list. And then I'll just start rebuilding this up. And like, of course, you know, I don't know how they do it, because to mentally do that, to be knocked out in a ring and to do a rematch, the anxiety and the pressure on that in comparison to just having the fight the first time must be huge. The media attention for it, the money value in it, the what's at stake is just high. So they have to mentally prepare for that, which is going to take a lot of self-sacrifice. It's going to take a lot of digging deep and finding that training, rehearsal, having the right people around them, having the right kind of belief in themselves, watching videos where they went eating, breathing, living it until they say to themselves, and they believe it, not just say to themselves, they say to themselves, I will win. Like, that's the mindset that they have to get in.
Yeah, I suppose you can't, like, if you're going into a match with any doubt, that can be the first exposure that kind of cracks open, can't it? And then,
because imagine that punch comes in the same as it did the first time, and you freeze, or you fly.
Yeah.
What's that taught the other person? You freeze, but you get knocked out again.
Yeah.
And then that's going to really condition that this could happen.
Yeah.
Or you fly and you back away and you show your quite wary of that, well then that other person's then gonna go for that even more. Yeah.
Kind of like what you hear a lot of sort of like around sort of different grappling gyms and MMA clubs. It's sort of making the fight camp and the training camp tougher than the actual fight itself. Just kind of, like you said, trying to prepare them for worst case scenario, and then it kind of gives you that winner's mindset of that person's not training harder than me. So it's like, was it Mike Tyson would say that they're not getting up at 6 a.m. to run every morning. I am. I'm out training them. I'm doing this and I'm beating them before they've actually got into the ring.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think they even say with sparring, your most concussions you have are in sparring. Then actually in the fight, you actually don't get punched as much as you would during sparring, because they need to make sure that whatever happens, and that person you're sparring, they'll naturally find that person who's similar to the opponent. So that, again, it's rehearsal. It's not the exact same replica, but it's as close as you could be to that. So yeah, and also just mentally getting in that mindset of you can have as many people around you as possible, but you know, they call it the lonely walk. When you're walking, you're going into that ring, you don't fully know what's going to happen. Because you can't control the other person, you don't know what their training camp's been like. And you know, they're saying as much as you said to them that they're going to beat you, but you don't really know. So all you have to kind of depend on is, my mindset needs to be solid. I can bounce back from this. Physically, I am solid. I've made the weight. I've done the training. And knowing in your head, I have actually done it. I'm not bluffing it. I've done it. I've got the 6 a.m. get-ups. I've sacrificed this. You know, I've not eaten the chocolate. I've done this, whatever. Okay. So all I can do now is just perform how I have been. Because that's a better mindset to go into than, I've been arguing with my partner. I was up till like 2 a.m. Yeah, you know, it was Christmas. I did overeat. I did this. You're not feeling good about yourself. You cannot hide from yourself. Like, eventually you will have to, like, look into the mirror and say, did I do everything I can? Yes or no?
A friend of mine calls that the mirror test. Like, you just can't lie to yourself, can you? Like, you know deep down, no matter what you say or what you try to convince or tell others, when you look in the mirror, it comes down to, have you done the work or not?
Yeah, we say like one of the kind of skills we use, like treat yourself like your best friend, and I do the Step Brothers photo, like we just become best friends. But it's true, like, would you talk to your best friend like that? So, for example, if you're like, oh, I'm useless, like I've done this because you've had one bad game, if your friend came to you and said, oh, I dropped the ball, I did this, would you lay into them as much as you would yourself? Would you beat them down as much as you would yourself? Or would you give them supportive, like, words of encouragement?
Depends what sort of, like, it does depend, doesn't it? I make a bit of a joke out of it, but you know, in MMA and jiu-jitsu gyms, like, blokes are horrible to each other, and the better you know each other, the worse you are to each other to some extent, and I'm sure that's true for rugby and football and everything else as well. But that definitely is something that needs to change, isn't it? Like, you know, it's a different thing from team sports. Like, you're an individual athlete, you are there to improve your performance, but it takes the whole room of training partners to build up and make you the athlete that you are, and you're doing that for everybody else that's in the room as well. But like, definitely not always as supportive as people could be or should be. So
yeah, I think the environment, as you said, you know, it isn't the most supportive, so you kind of have to have that support outside of that, or, you know, it's all because, like, you see those young people who go in, it must be so daunting to go into like a team and assert yourself and be used to that kind of, you know, environment of, they're going to say I'm shit, if it goes wrong the full team are going to be against me here, like the pressure of that on top of already feeling like, you know, you've ruined the game. Then you've had a manager scream in your face, and you've had the full team be like, fucking hell, like, are you blind? Like, what are you doing?
There's that element of like hazing as well, isn't there? When you're a new guy in a team, or you're the new guy in the room, whether that's like boxing or whatever, and you know, that kind of, there's like a mental and sometimes a physical beat down as well. It's like a bit of a welcome to the boys' room sort of thing.
Yeah, it's like pack animals. It goes back to that kind of animalistic sort of, you know, man, evolution. We're strong. Nothing's gonna like offend me. I'll give it to you, give it back to me, I've got to take it, I'll give it you back even more.
But what you find with that as well is, like, if you can kind of weather the storm on that, then you get welcomed into the circle. more readily than somebody who's going to shy away from that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, as much as
culture, isn't it? Like,
yeah, you know, can we trust you as one of our guys, sort of thing, who's going to help out when it's tough and who's going to give us tough training and whatever. And I don't know whether I think that's a good thing or a bad thing.
It depends. I think some clubs do thrive in it because you do get some characters who will gravitate towards that kind of place, and then you'll get some people that will go there going, this ain't for me, and then they'll go find another club where it's kind of like, oh, these are more welcoming here, these are more kind of my kind of people. So I can imagine it'll depend on your personality type and what actually attracts you to sticking around to a certain place.
yeah.
So there's a big difference between team sports and individuals in terms of like preparation for physical, nutritional, mental, because there isn't that external support of somebody looking over you as a cog of the machine of the team and just being like, right, we've got a room full of 30 guys who are doing their own thing for their own purpose. Do you think that affects the way that you should either approach it from yourself? But I suppose it's like many other things, isn't it? Almost everything. You've got to take ownership of every aspect of your own life. Nobody else is going to do it for you. Like you said before, you know, it's up to you to know your own body better and know your own mind better. And I think that can be a difficult first hurdle for some people to get over because they've just not had, and probably more so with team sports, the onus put on them of you've got to be conscious of what you're doing with your life to make sure that you're getting the most out of your performance.
Yeah, I think you asked about 3 different questions there, so I'll try and remember. I think the difference is, definitely, you find individual sports are more selfish. They have to be. They can only really depend on themselves within that sport. Yeah, they have a strong team around them of people they trust, and they have the elements of that, but realistically they know on the day the only person who can perform and who our lives are going to be on is themselves. I think whereas with teams, you can get away a little bit with having a bad day as long as your team is backing you. Yes, you might get, crap from the team, or you might get taken off or whatever, but it's not fully on you unless you are like a star player and there's an expectant like pressure level there. There's a lot of studies been in the past where people, are really set to make it, and then there's people who are more like mid-level, and your mid-level people, whether it's in school, sport, business, in like academics, generally make it more so than the 10% of the people at the top, because that pressure becomes too much. There's been a lot of stars who've been in football who've ended up, leaving for alcohol abuse or just not performing or just drop down the levels rapidly because they're not able to kind of maintain that level of eliteness which is expected of them. And similar with like individual sport, that they can crack and crumble. Like, you can have, your nutritionists around you, your strength and conditioning, all those sort of people, and then as soon as, you leave that sport or anything like that, they're de-skilled. They actually don't know what protein is. They don't know why they eat that food. Yep. So they go on this like cycle of like binge eating, inflammatory foods, everything, and gain a lot of weight quite quickly. Yep. Because they're just like, what? But you'd think to everyone else, well, you've been eating those breakfasts, those meals, you've had that training pattern, you know what makes your body work, what you thrive off. Yet when they have to apply it to themselves, because they've been running kind of not consciously aware of what's actually going on, the goal is just, I have to, perform at the Olympics, I have to perform 2 matches a year, 2 boxing matches a year, whatever. The actual cogs of like externally, they just expect that to be there. It's selfish. It's like, the way they speak to the team and things like that, you can see it within it. Whereas within team sport, there's a level of respect amongst it, because they all know with any given term they could be taken off that team and someone put in their place. Yeah. And, if they get too high, it could come crashing quite down. So I think there's definitely differences, which I think all of us can relate to. If you're part of a family, you know your place within that family, you know what you can get away with, you know what you can't, you know who's going to have you in certain situations, you know who's going to give you a little bit of shit here and there. You know the dynamic, it's about dynamic. And then, then the next day you move out, you go be a student at uni, or, you buy a house or whatever. It's like, oh, yeah, Mum did do my washing, that did take up some time. Yeah, they did do meal prep, that made me happy. Oh, how do I actually do this? Or, like, you notice all those little things, and it's like, oh, at first you might not even notice so many people that go to uni. Like, I work with a lot of clients who do it, and the young people, and they're at university and they're depressed. And it's because your environment's changed. And I think that's reflective, if anyone, like, but there's a lot of research in terms of sport being the only thing that's replicable to being in the war. The environment's very similar to that of what it would be like being in the war.
Yeah. I think like what you said as well is it's taking advantage of the information that's around you and using it from a point of view that you can apply to yourself outside of that one situation as well. So, you know, like if we're talking about being at home and your mum doing your washing and cooking your food all the time, that's fine and all great. But if you're not taking the opportunity to learn, like, how do I cook my own meal and do this thing, and then you go away and you're completely fucked because you don't know how to do anything for yourself.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like that, and a lot of people are like that with when they've got a coach as well. So they'll just kind of let the coach take the reins, let them do everything for them, not absorb any of the information, and then guess what, you're not with that coach anymore because you've moved or whatever, and now you're back to stage one. And either you've got to develop a really trustful relationship with somebody else that's going to do it, or you try and educate yourself again from point zero, and you've missed out on a real good opportunity to absorb that information from a credible source to begin with. So I suppose a good piece of advice on that would just be aware of the good stuff that you've got around you and try and capitalise and merge that into other aspects of your life as well.
Yeah, I think reflection's a massive tool. I think a lot of people don't, you know, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs sort of thing. You know, it's only when you get to that top of that pyramid where it's like self-mastery, and I don't think a lot of people get to there because they don't have to, or because things are made too easy in different areas, or they are just naive and they don't want to dig deep. They don't actually want to be accountable. I find a lot of people don't want to be accountable. Like, so many people say, I don't know why I'm in this position. Right, well, let's look at your choices. You chose to be in a bad relationship. Yes, it was a bad relationship, but did you make a choice, yes or no? And it gets as simple as like creating a timeline with someone to be like, why are you here? What factors are driving this? Like, okay, so every time you have a bad moment, you go on a 3-day bender. How does that make you feel the week after? Yeah. Awful. Why are you not looking at these themes and being like, this is quite consistent in my life, like that's not positively influencing me? But that's, I think, where therapy comes in a lot of times, is identifying those thought patterns, making someone accountable. Because, you know, you have therapy with someone 1 hour a week, or what are they doing for the rest of those hours? If they're not actually applying it, then they're not going to change. And everyone has opportunity to change. But the first thing you have to do is say, like, I want to change, or I want support. And I think with athletes in sport, it usually comes after the career, where it comes crashing down, and then they say, I want support, or something needs to change, or they'll get admitted themselves because it'll go to like gambling addiction, alcohol addiction, drug addiction. They'll go to bankruptcy. Yeah, but that's because they're stimulants, aren't they? So if people feel flat, you're looking for a stimulant, but you're not aware of the depression symptoms from that. And it's just going to create a cycle, and the cycle's going to get worse. You're not actually looking at, it's hard, like self-mastery is 80% of the time you adhere to those principles. So 20% of the time, allow some flexibility for yourself. No one is perfect. But I think just getting to that point and I think one of the main things I would say to people is find your support network is a biggie. I think in general day-to-day life, it's very easy to isolate yourself. But you got to ask we're not meant to isolate. Yeah. As humans, we are not meant to isolate. If you isolate yourself, it's because your environment isn't serving you. You don't have the right people around you. You may be depressed if you're isolating that much. There may be something you need to speak about, but we are not meant to be that way. Mm. And having a support network, I say to my friends all the time, just even going for a walk and a coffee, and just ask someone if they're telling you something, do you want advice right now? Do you want me to just listen? 2 very different things. Yeah. And I think if people had that trust in person, that rapport with someone, a lot of their issues wouldn't become catastrophic. I think there would be a lot less mental health worldwide. I think if people looked at themselves intrinsically and thought, what actually serves me, again, you're going to identify factors which are going to make you thrive, and essentially that's what it is. It's like proactive factors for mental wellness rather than reactive when it's all gone, wrong.
We talked about that a lot this year, haven't we, with like COVID being a big thing and people being away from those support groups. Like Jiu-Jitsu is a great one because you turn up on the mat and with those 20, 30 people that are there, however many of them you interact with on a daily basis when you're training, that is part of your support bubble. And whether it's just a bit of an escape from what's going on at work, whether you actually sit down and have that in-depth conversation with them, you might not always have a conversation with your training partners that you're having problems at home or work or whatever, but it's a support group in a different way, isn't it?
And it has that aspect of it's quite meditative because you have to be present. So because it is very hard to be present at the moment, like in day to day, where bills, stress, work, everything's going on, it's circling around your head. But there's a lot of people that find like a little bit of safety, I'd say, in stepping on the mats. And when you are sparring, if your mind wanders, you're gonna get caught.
Yeah, there's no opportunity for that, is there really? I think mindfulness is, like you said there, being present. To say depression is about thinking too much about the past, anxiety too much about the future. Mindfulness is something I am huge on. Like, people don't understand the power of breathing. Like, just even regulating your breathing and things like that. I think everyone should implement mindfulness. Be present, feel like grounded. I think that's massive. We do a lot of visualization, skills like that, and things like brain dumpsters. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's super simple, but you have to like implement it. So like if you're feeling over,
on this than me, mate.
Journal.
I was going to say keywords, mindfulness, meditation. You had proactive factors earlier. I was like, yes, predisposing. You said, I was like,
well done, like good stuff.
Yeah.
This is that lot
of the class
just become an AP.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
Oh, amazing, yeah. What service? No, sorry. Sorry.
Clinical.
Oh, amazing, yeah.
And she's going to PhD hopefully in the next couple of years. So.
And like psychology is going to take off. It has to after COVID. Like there's such a threshold for it now. It's essential. I think there was 2 points. So one was about the support networks with every client I work with. 100%. Especially when depression's noticed there, it's the lack of support network. A lot of clients are overseas, they can't even get back home, they've had deaths in their family, not even been able to attend funerals, things like that. They notice that, guys, we'll have Zoom chats, we did the whole pub quiz thing at the start, but actually that small little window where they see their friends face to face, which we might be able to just offload and say, oh, it's not great at home at the moment, or just subliminally having that message, they're not having access to it, and they're not going to reach out to the mate to just vent it out. So that opportunity to do that has been reduced. Not seeing elderly parents because of COVID, having the worries about that and not wanting to put any worries on. Again, another supportive factor being reduced. And a lot of people are having relationship difficulties, and they'll say like, yeah, the one person I would speak to is my wife, my husband, but right now our problem is together, so I can't discuss it with this person. So I think support network's huge. And then I can't remember what your second point was now.
Mindfulness and present.
Yeah, so mindfulness, like a lot of different mindfulness and visualization things, but one thing which is massive, especially if you're having difficulty sleeping, you've tried like all the sleep hygiene things, reduce coffee, regular set time, even changing your room around, getting a different vibe, things like that. So a brain dumpster is just get a sheet of paper, and you will, at first, you'll feel overwhelmed doing it, and you'll think you've got all these things in your brain, but when you've actually got a pen and paper and you actually need to write down, you'll write about 4 things, guaranteed. Because you're like, oh, alright, so like, why do I feel like that's it? But then as you fine tune it a bit more, you'll write stuff on it like, that stupid guy walked out in the front of the road and I had to slam on today. But things you're holding on to which you don't even realise. So you'll just write, all these things which are going on in your brain, anything possible, to-do list for the next day, things that people have said to you in work today, what you've had for food, anything which your brain is processing, write it down, and you'll fill the sheet. And in the morning, you'll look up, and there'll literally be maybe 1 or 2 things that are actually important on that list, which you need to take with you for the day.
Yeah.
And if you consistently do that, honestly, you feel like your brain has been flushed, like it feels less heavy, it becomes quite clear about what might be affecting you, because you can see it quite visually. Seeing things is like, I think, really beneficial for anyone. And if you are having therapy at the time, take it to your session, whatever that may be. All these things that, you know, really quick, like mindfulness, like breathing in and out for 8. I think everyone should do that just before bed, just to like get used to that feeling of like feeling your body on the bed, and like my back's on the bed, like, not trying to plug Barcode page, but at the end of the sessions, that's one thing I would do, like get people to like body scan and just become aware of like, is there any tension in your body? Like, what thoughts are you having right now? What is your brain telling you? Are they positive thoughts? Are they quite self-critical? Do you feel like your body and mind's actually connected? Are they in harmony at the moment? Things like that. And then things like visualization. So, you know, we do a lot of talking to athletes about going into an elevator. Obviously, I'm quite a lot more long-winded than this. Like going into an elevator, going up the elevator, going into a room. There's a desk in the room. So, like, obviously with their eyes closed, visualizing what that desk looks like. You sit down, there's a box, you put the box on. What does a box look like? Open the box. Now you have the opportunity to put things from your brain into this box. What kind of things would you like to put in? This, that, the other. Quite a long-winded process. Put it under the box, leave the room, down the elevator, open. But to the point where like they're visualising even what clothes they're wearing and things like that. And I don't think there's a client I've not worked with that's been like, my shoulders have dropped, like I feel like the tension's gone, like I feel like I'm walking on air as I'm leaving.
That's great.
Yeah, so it's things like that.
So just, I've got 2 questions. So one, going back to when you were talking about the pyramid of hierarchy with self-mastery being at the top, which is going to be very difficult for a lot of people to achieve. What are the levels below that? And part 2 of the question would be, what things can people do, like yoga or meditation, to move themselves up the pyramid?
Yeah, so like obviously your basic needs is things like shelter, food, warmth. Then you've got things like love, affection, purpose, like job, things like that. And then you've got your, oh God, this is awful. This is bad, isn't it?
Doesn't have to be exact.
Doesn't have to be exact. And then it's just things more so like, obviously you've got like your morals, your moral compass, like your purpose, things like that. You drive, then you've got your passions. Things like just, passion, things like that. And then feelings, understanding feelings, explorative feelings, empathy, things like that. And then your self-mastery kind of mates. But so, you know, some people with COVID are struggling to shelter, warmth, love. Yeah. You know, it's really taking people back. And that's not that you have to hit that to get that, to get that, to get that. They're interchangeable. Okay. So you can have, you know, empathy for someone, but you might not have a home. You know, you might not have shelter, your survival's low. So it's about like where you're at and kind of getting that to that peak point. So yeah, that's the first one. What's the second question?
Tools like yoga or meditation, or, you know, you can plug what you were talking about with the parkour as well. That's fine, because we want to hear about that. Yeah.
As we said earlier, parkour, not to be confused with parkour.
Could you do both at the same time though? We were talking about, I want to see parkour with ankle weights and 2 kilo dumbbells. I think that'd up the risk. No. That'd definitely up the risk level, wouldn't it?
Yeah, like a Pilates where you're like gripping onto stuff.
Definitely.
Parkour.
You could wear your yoga mat as a cape as well.
Oh my god.
There we go, there's the next inspiration.
Yeah, TikTok.
Yeah, definitely.
I need it, don't I? I need TikTok. 100%. It's essential. It's going to have to get TikTok. When I'm moving with Lauren, she's going to have to be like my full film photographer with like, sorry Lauren, but TikToks.
Hey, if that's the way it goes, that's fine.
Yeah, so like yoga, big advocate. Some people find that they don't get much from it at first because they physically cannot switch off. And, you know, I've been there myself where I've been in a yoga class and, you know, you're doing your down dog, you're doing your warrior. And I'm thinking, wish I was lifting weights. I'm absolutely burning nothing here. Like, or I'll be thinking about stuff and I'm thinking, what? That thought happened when I was 8 years old. Why am I thinking of that in a yoga class? But that's the things that you should be really kind of mindful of, is like, well, why am I having these thoughts? Is that something I need to address? Or can I just let that thought come and pass? Like, sometimes that's all you need to do. And I think the mindfulness at the end of yoga is really restorative. It's really, it depends on the topic of kind of like, is it about self-love? Is it about connecting with your body? Is it about like, you know, factoring in how you're going to fit everything in during the week. You know, when I was in America and we was doing the barcode class, this is why I absolutely fell in love with that. I was like, this is me to a T. Obviously, it's got the elements of like ballet and dance, which I love, and the yoga and Pilates, and it just shreds you, absolutely shreds you. Not a plug, it's true.
Do we need to attend?
Can I do your class? Can we actually do one?
Yeah,
And see if yeah, we'll do a class. And yeah, the woman in it, her energy was everything. Like, she was like an ex-dancer. She looked amazing, but her energy was just, she was like, come on guys, like, you know, we're in this class, this is for you, your kids are at school, your husband's not here, take this time for you, I want to see you work it for you, you're doing it for you, like, and it was just so uplifting. Honestly, I got to the end of class, I was like, oh my god, I'm going to have to pick my kids up. I felt like I had kids to pick up.
Was she American?
Yeah, she's American.
What is it about Americans that can get away with being like that in the class? If I tried that, I think it just
Let's get sort of looked at going,
yeah.
good job on, mate. Come
Yeah, like, I want to bring an element of that to my classes, and I want people to leave there feeling like they've worked their body hard, that they're feeling connected, and that they're feeling positive. Like, I think positive psychology is like, sounds wishy-washy, and I know a lot of people just like think positive, and it's like, think positive, it's like easy said than it's like someone tells you to smile. It's like, oh, thanks, didn't think of that. Thank you. But yeah, like, just awareness and energy. I think I'm very in tune with that sort of thing. I can like sense it from people. I don't know if it's my job, I don't know who I am as a person. I can just sense it, and generally I can ask the right questions to like get that information. But again, it's about the person wanting to do that, and I think yoga really helps. I think as a male, it's more accepting now. You know, in America they all do it. I was in a class next to Adam Sandler. I was loving life. I was like, please, Amber, build the confidence to ask for a selfie, please. But I didn't.
Not in the middle of the session.
I didn't, but like, I was down dogging with a leg up, and I was like, do you know, because I was like, is it him? Is it him? And I was like, I was getting in positions I'd never even got in before, because I was like,
stop fucking looking at it.
no, but honestly, I was like,
Was it Adam Sandler?
it was Adam
Did you get the
Sandler. I
selfie?
didn't. I was
Damn
too.
it.
I know. I know. I was proper giddy as well. I was like, text my mum. I was like, oh my god,
Favourite Adam
been
Sandler?
down dogging with Adam Sandler doesn't sound as rude as it should be.
Favourite Adam Sandler movie?
Big Daddy.
Daddy.
He taught me how to pee in a building.
Maybe that's why he goes to yoga.
Yeah.
I honestly still like shout now in my house. I'm like, I wipe my own ass.
I'm sure your mum loves that.
Yeah, and that he can't even spell hip hop anonymous.
Hip Hop Anonymous.
It's so funny.
What's your favourite Adam Sandler movie?
It's always got to be, they got fun.
Happy Gilmore.
Happy Gilmore.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
oh,
can't quote it, but I'll enjoy it.
50 First Dates as well, my
He's a
heart.
good one as well. He's got some decent movies, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one that he did where he was it with Seth Rogen, where he was the sort of dying comedian. It's one of the bit more one of his sincere ones. One of them was going. It's on the internet, isn't there?
Onion.
So what's different about parkour that like people should get into? Different for everyone. A lot of people know what yoga is, know what Pilates is. What's different about parkour that people should? Why should they do that and not something that they're more familiar with?
So you just like kind of give you a little summary?
Yeah. You got notes?
I have just literally done a pause, so bear with me, please. Should know this.
What page is the post on?
Yeah.
It's Amber. How clever is this? Amber Core? Because my name's Amber.
Is that call with a K?
Amber Core. Amber Core. It's actually Amber AMB ARRE _ core. Amber _ core. So it's known for using small isometric movements to gradually fatigue muscle groups at a time, one muscle group at a time, focusing on hips, thighs, butts, abs and arms. The tiny movements work to tire out the muscles, resulting in lean muscle, but also to reinforce the mind-body connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got terrible flexibility in my shoulders and my hips from jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Is it something that would be good for that?
Massively, like posture and alignment is like the number one focus for parkour. So it's like all focusing around that. So it's like sometimes you might not feel that maybe you're doing as much movement as someone who has a more mobile body like me, but what you'd be gaining for it would probably be a lot more, because in actual your general day-to-day life it would help you more improve. So I guess it's for every like beginners, 100% like alignment and posture, and then build it up to be like okay, so my alignment and posture is great. Because not necessarily, like, how many people do you see, like, lift, and then there's a lot of guys at the gym who come on and be like, oh yeah, I shouldn't have lifted that many heavy weights when I was younger, like, can't even reach down to get my breakfast in the morning. I don't want that to be me. I really want to be, like, nimble and nifty and, like, you know, able to move.
You should have seen me putting my socks on the other week.
Yeah.
I don't know what
So you know that there's a deficit there in your own, and you need your hips.
100%.
You need flexible range of movement. So, like, you know there's a deficit, yet what are you doing to...
And this is why I'm trying to get it out of you. Why should I be doing parkour? Because I've tried yoga before, and I'm perfectly honest, I find it boring, and I lose interest with it after... I can do it for about 3 weeks.
3 weeks solid?
3 weeks, non-stop, absolute stamina. But then I get sick of it. It's just like, I'm sick of doing the same thing here. I just lose a bit of interest, to be perfectly honest. I think a difficult thing with yoga and stretching and mobility, and I was talking to somebody about this the other week, it's difficult to see immediate progression with it, and I think I personally find that that's then what switches me off. I don't mind doing the same thing if I'm seeing the progression, but I think when I find yoga difficult to stick with for a long period of time, and Pilates as well, if I'm honest.
How many people have that mindset though? They want short-term reinforcement, the long-term reinforcement, they can't attain to it. They give up alcohol and they do it for 2 weeks. Because they can't do it, or they start a new diet, they get the meal plan delivered, but after a week they're bored of it.
100%.
Because they're not seeing that drastic change. And I think it is about, like, teaching people it's like long-term goals, but set yourself daily ones. And then I think goal setting's massive, that's a topic in itself. And having that long-term one, but you notice there's a deficit, you need to train your brain to be like, okay, I don't find this as enjoyable as I do doing other things, but the benefits of this are this, this and this.
Mm-hmm.
I'll reassess this in 6 weeks' time and see if it's having a benefit.
I think that would be one of the things as well that's like a difficult measure, because I know exactly what you're talking about, and I found it difficult to have those measuring sticks of what actually does success look like at the end of it, and being able to put my socks on without any back pain in the morning is definitely going to be one of them. But like, if you're going into the gym and lifting weights or whatever it is, once you've lifted the weight, that was a marker of success, and it's easy to measure it and plan towards that. But I think for me, I found it difficult to like, right, okay, now my hips are more mobile. How have I verified that? Like, what does actually look like in terms of success to me? And I think that's probably where I found difficulty in sticking with something, because I've not identified any yardsticks early on to begin with.
So obviously, your goal is to put your sock on without being in any pain.
Sounds really bad, that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
No, I'd like to be more flexible in my hips and my shoulders. And
well, first of all, measure your range of flexibility. Actually get a measuring tool out and measure it. And then attend the classes, whatever you need to do. And then, every day say to me, well, I'm 1 class closer to achieving that. 2 class closer. Then, goal setting, have SMART goals. Set your goals. What are they? Make them measurable. Make them attainable. Make them realistic, and then put a time frame on it. So in 6 weeks, say to yourself, right, I'm going to re-measure all my range of motion. I'm going to see if actually my body feels any different. So get that feedback from yourself. Whether you need it, if people are on a diet, they're going to monitor themselves on the circumference and those scales. You need to do it in a different way to measure your flexibility, your ability to do it. And how your body actually feels. You might notice some other skills as well, like what else have I achieved? I actually noticed my brain feels a little bit lighter after the classes and stuff. So start creating a profile of how it actually makes you feel. May go the other way. You may be like, my flexibility's not changed. I actually dread going to the sessions and do this. Well, great, you've identified that. Fuck yoga off. Start something new.
I feel like I'm ready to sign up. I've just
have you been told
me to do that, basically.
Yeah, but that's kind of how it is.
Sounds good. It sounds hard. I've not done any level of cardio like that for a while. I think I'm going to, as you said, get ripped.
Yeah, honestly, you get shredded. I'm going to post a selfie on my page. Honestly, seriously, you just I've got an 8-pack at the moment.
Yeah.
The only thing I've changed is I've stopped lifting as many weights and I'm doing more parkour.
Do you think you can do it both simultaneously? If you did want to lift weights and do it,
I do both now.
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas before I either go down the route of especially in lockdown, just a lot of walking and getting out, because I needed that mental like difference between being at home, working at home, doing everything from home. And I would generally do like, I got a bench and, you know, some quite lightweight, so I'd do like resistance work. So it wasn't really weightlifting. So then my goal was like, as soon as I get back to gym, yes, I've got a proper squat rack, I can lift, I can do this. And then I go for that for a bit. And then I notice that my body I don't like it as much as how I feel when I'm just maybe doing weights 3 times a week. I just split it between like lower body, push-pull session, that's me. Everything else is just bar, walking. I move every day, I'm looking like doing that.
Yeah.
But it's what people like, their body shape as well, like how your body responds to it. I think because I've always done dance, I think my body like thrives off that movement of how dance would be, and like the walking element of it, and more kind of like HIIT workouts than it would do from a mentally, like I sometimes go to the gym before work because I want to make sure I'm in the best mindset possible for the day. I don't think going into the gym and lifting a weight that was really heavy would give me the same mental stability.
It's quite fatiguing to your central nervous system, isn't it? You're probably just going to end up feeling more tired than going into work if you've come in and done a session of 1 rep maxes on deadlift. Like, you're not setting yourself up for a good day, you're setting yourself up for a nap at 10:30. And,
Yeah, so I think it's more around the individual as well, what people enjoy, and just workouts. Like, I'm not saying bar's going to be for everyone, I don't think it would be for everyone, but certainly try it if you want to, and if it does work for you and you do feel like your body's got more movement. I guess it's kind of the bridge between cardio, actually getting sweaty, and also yoga and Pilates, and also understanding your body and creating those, like, as they call it, like lean lines.
And then you've also got, like you said, the reflective portion of it at the end of the workout as well. So, like, what does a typical class look like, split between the physical aspects of the class and then the meditative, reflective aspects at the end, presumably?
Yeah, it's like your warm-up is kind of, you know, you're doing a lot of, like, jumping work, a lot of, like, you know, you've a lot of functional work as well, so like your plie, demi-plie, into, like, a lot of arm and leg simultaneous work. So if you're squatting down, you're also raising like whatever weight you're doing, so you're doing it a lot. Then you split that into like your leg work, then to your arm work. Core work is a killer, like they call it like the bar shakes, and your core shakes. The song I've actually chose to do it to at the time is called Shake, because I was like shake.
And like, shake and jiggle are different things. We're thinking we're just going to be fucking jiggling.
No. No, honestly, you're really. I'm even going to do a workout, because I love drums. Like, drums get me going.
You can get out of this. Keep going. Drums.
Drums get me going. Physically.
Primed for a class.
Primed for a class. Yeah. They like speak to my soul, and like I can skip for an hour if I've got like a good drum. Like, I need that beat.
Yeah, to get going in the class. So the music that you've got in the class is quite drum orientated then?
Yeah, and so obviously I love Travis Barker, so it's going to be a Travis Barker class. So it's going to be a high energy, and it's just going to shred. I went through the routine the other day.
How long have that one planned, that Travis Barker?
Oh, since I was about 4. Honestly, I hope I tag him and he falls in love with me, but I don't think it'll happen.
He seems like a guy who'd be into that sort of stuff. He does.
Yeah, he's going out with Kourtney Kardashian at the moment, which I'm just here for. Like, she tattooed his arm, like, that's what I'm here for.
She do a good job.
She wrote "I love you," it's just quite cute on his existing tattoos. Yeah, I'm here for that. Well, that's what I think I want.
He's an interesting guy, didn't he? He survived the plane crash, didn't he?
Yeah. He was like one of the only ones who survived it as well. And hasn't he had like brain trauma or something like that? There was something.
And he's a vegan as well, isn't he? So that must be why he survived.
Definitely.
Yeah, plant-based power.
Good karma. Good karma.
Yeah. But yeah, so Travis Barker, and I went through it the other day with my friend, and we burnt 790 calories in the class, and I was like, yes, we are here for this like elite sweat, because you can't give up. You have to keep going, because the drums, and it's like, no, I'm not giving up. Like, another squat, lunge, another squat. Like, so you've got to do it.
Like, I would not, like, doing an average basic cardio session, I would probably do about 800 calories in an hour just because I'm heavy. Like, I'm going to burn like 1,500
Oh
calories.
yeah, you would. Yeah, you would.
Literally like a stone in a class.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would shred, especially because like at first it was like 2 kg to 4 kg max. It's like you're not really going to gain that much from it. I want to see you be able to lift that at the end.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying, because I bet you can't. I bet you literally.
I mean, I've been trying hard to get up to 100 kilos over lockdown and I've achieved it, and I think it's time to get Travis barcode. I'm a fat fuck, basically. That's what's happened over
And
lockdown.
I'm just here.
You
so-
guys are not fat. You're big guys. Like I feel quite like
I
submissive.
think it's the chairs. We've pinned
I was
ourselves
gonna
in the
say,
higher
yeah.
chairs.
What a power trip.
We were joking about it being like a job interview in here the other week with the table and the desk. So yeah, we probably should have found smaller chairs.
Reckon so.
There's only stools upstairs, so that might have been a bit uncomfortable for an hour. Or however long
You're
we've
tiny
been
as well,
talking.
so you're not.
Yeah, that would have been more awkward.
Yeah, I think I've held my own though.
Yeah, it's been good. I've enjoyed it. Loads of helpful stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Lots to take away from there. And I'd say everyone should be listening to this with a notepad.
I know, yeah, the skills, or send me a message.
There we go. Do you want to plug yourself again before we...
Amber_core. I don't know how to do that. Can we
It's part of the thing, isn't it? You can stick it in on part of the logo or
yeah.
whatever.
We've developed this thing between my friends where, like, instead of fist pumping,
Yeah.
you touch the thumb
Touch
as
the
well.
thumbs,